Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Earth Station Omega, her dark eyes fixed on the approaching vessel. The ship's hull bore the scars of weapons fire, its propulsion systems flickering weakly against the star-studded backdrop of deep space. Behind her, the station's bridge crew worked in tense silence, monitoring the disabled craft's approach. "Life signs?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty churning in her gut. Lieutenant Rivera's fingers danced across his console. 37 distinct signatures, Commander. None matching known species patterns. He paused, frowning. Their life support systems are critical. Sarah's jaw tightened. First contact scenarios were delicate enough without the complication of a medical emergency. Open a channel. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that made Sarah's breath catch. The alien before her was humanoid, but with iridescent skin that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Luminous eyes the color of distant nebulae fixed on Sarah, with desperate intensity. "I am Kiravel, healer of the Luminian people," the alien spoke, her universal translator rendering her musical language into crisp English. "We seek sanctuary from those who would destroy us for our beliefs." Sarah's training kicked in. "I am Commander Chen of Earth Station Omega. What forces pursue you?" "The Drachnid Imperium." Kiravel's light dimmed perceptibly. "They consider our healing abilities a threat to their military supremacy. We refuse to weaponize our gifts. Now they hunt us like animals." Warning klaxons blared across the bridge. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, Rivera shouted. "Drachnid warships, Commander. 7 of them." Sarah's mind raced. Earth had no formal treaties with either species. Harboring refugees could spark an interstellar incident. Refusing aid would condemn 37 innocent lives to death. The decision crystallized in her heart before her mind finished weighing the consequences. "Lieutenant, engage emergency docking procedures. Medical teams to Bay 3. She turned back to the screen. "Kiravel, we're bringing you in. Prepare your people for immediate evacuation." "Commander," her XO protested. "Regulations state." "Regulations don't account for genocide, Commander Phillips." Sarah's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I won't stand by and watch innocent beings die when we have the power to prevent it." The Drachnid flagship's transmission cut across their channel, its commander's scaled visage filling the screen. "Earth Station. This is Warmaster Kexthor. You harbor criminals against the Imperium. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences of defying Drachnid justice." Sarah stood straighter, meeting the alien's serpentine gaze. "Warmaster, you have entered Earth-controlled space without authorization. The beings aboard that vessel have requested asylum under human protection. Any hostile action against this station will be considered an act of war against Earth itself. You would risk war for these aberrations." Kexthor's voice dripped with contempt. "We would risk war to protect the innocent." Sarah's reply was steel wrapped in silk. "That's what humans do." The docking clamps engaged with a resonating thud. Behind her, Sarah heard Rivera's whispered, "They're in." "Your choice is made then." Kexthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Remember in the days to come that you chose this path." The transmission cut off. Sarah turned to her crew, each face showing a mixture of fear and determination. "Battle stations. Alert Earth Command of our situation, and get those refugees to medical immediately." As she strode toward the turbolift, Sarah caught Philip's troubled gaze. Was this the right call, Commander? Sarah thought of Kiravel's desperate eyes, of 37 beings fleeing persecution for the crime of refusing to turn healing into a weapon. Some choices define who we are, John. This is one of them. The lift doors closed, carrying her toward whatever consequences awaited. In her mind, Sarah could already hear the approaching storm of diplomats, military officials, and politicians who would question her decision. But as she emerged into the organized chaos of the medical bay, watching her crew efficiently directing the wounded Luminians to treatment areas, she knew she would make the same choice again. Kiravel stood in the center of it all, her ethereal glow strengthening as she realized they were truly safe. Her eyes met Sarah's across the bay, and something passed between them. An understanding that transcended species. In that moment, Sarah knew that whatever came next, humanity had gained something precious. The chance to prove that compassion knew no borders, not even those between the stars. Above them, the Drachnid ships held position like circling predators. The real test was just beginning. The days following the Luminians' arrival transformed Earth Station Omega in ways Sarah Chen never expected. The station's austere corridors now pulsed with subtle bioluminescence, where the refugees had modified the lighting to match their physiological needs. Their presence brought both wonder and worry to the human crew. Sarah found Curaval in the converted cargo bay that now served as the Luminians' primary living space. The healer stood before a wall of hydroponics, her hands hovering over a withered plant. Soft light flowed from her fingertips, and beneath her touch, the plant's leaves unfurled, green and vital once more. "Remarkable," Sarah said, announcing her presence. "Though I suspect that's not the full extent of your people's abilities." Curaval turned, her ethereal features arranging themselves into what Sarah had learned was a smile. "You are perceptive, Commander. We can heal far more than simple vegetation." Her glow dimmed slightly. "It is why the Drachnid want us. They believe our gifts could make their soldiers virtually immortal. But you refused. Healing should preserve life, not prolong war." Curaval's voice carried centuries of conviction. "We would rather face extinction than betray our principles." A familiar weight settled in Sarah's chest. The Drachnid fleet had grown to 12 ships over the past week. Earth Command's messages grew increasingly terse, filled with diplomatic double-talk that boiled down to one essential truth: she was on her own. "Your principles may have doomed my crew as well," Sarah said softly, not accusingly but stating a fact they both knew. Curaval's luminescence flickered with what Sarah had come to recognize as distress. "We could leave. Find another." "No." Sarah's response was immediate. "That's not what I meant. I made my choice, and I stand by it." Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Rivera's voice over the comm. "Commander to the bridge. Priority message from the Drachnid flagship." Sarah exchanged glances with Curaval. "Come with me. You should hear this." The bridge was silent as War Master Kexthor's scaled visage filled the main screen. His serpentine eyes seemed to bore through them all. "Commander Chen, my patience expires." His mandibles clicked in irritation. "You have 24 Earth hours to surrender the Luminian fugitives. After that, we will take them by force." Sarah felt the crew's eyes on her. "War Master, these people have requested asylum. Under Earth law. Your laws mean nothing to the Imperium." Kexthor's tail lashed behind him. "These creatures possess knowledge that belongs to us. Their abilities could revolutionize warfare itself. Their abilities belong to them." Sarah countered, her voice hard. "They've chosen how to use their gifts. Neither you nor anyone else has the right to force them to become weapons." Such noble sentiments. Kexthor's laugh was like grinding metal. "Will they comfort you when your station burns?" The transmission cut off. Sarah turned to find Curaval studying her intently, the healer's natural glow pulsing with emotion. "You continue to defend us, knowing the cost." Curaval's voice was thick with wonder. "Why?" Sarah thought of Earth's history, of all the times people had stood by while others were persecuted. Because someone has to take a stand. Because if we abandon our principles the moment they become inconvenient, they're not really principles at all. She moved to the tactical station, reviewing their defenses. The station's shields were strong, but against 12 Drachnid warships. "Lieutenant Rivera, begin evacuating non-essential personnel. Priority on families with children." "You believe they will attack?" Curaval asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "I believe Kexthor is used to getting his way." Sarah managed a grim smile. "He's about to learn that humans can be surprisingly stubborn when it comes to protecting those who need it." As evacuation orders spread through the station, Sarah watched her crew respond with calm efficiency. No one questioned the orders. No one suggested surrendering the Luminians. They had all made their choice, just as she had. Kiravel placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder, and a warm sensation flowed through her body, easing the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "My people have a saying," the healer said softly. "The brightest lights shine in the darkest spaces. Your species burns very bright indeed, Commander Chen." Sarah covered Kiravel's hand with her own. "Let's hope it's bright enough to get us through what's coming." Above them, the Drachnid ships tightened their blockade, weapon systems humming with deadly purpose. The 24-hour countdown had begun, and with it, the true test of humanity's commitment to its ideals. In the converted cargo bay below, the other Luminian refugees continued their work, their combined glow creating patterns of light that danced across the station's walls like aurora borealis. They had brought beauty to this place of steel and ceramics, a reminder of what would be lost if they failed. Sarah Chen squared her shoulders and began preparing her station for war. Sometimes standing up for what was right meant standing alone. But as she looked around at her determined crew, at Kiravel's unwavering presence beside her, she knew they were anything but alone. The next 24 hours would change everything. They just had to survive them first. The Drachnid attack came 3 hours before their ultimatum expired. Sarah was reviewing evacuation protocols when the first barrage hit. The station shuddered violently, emergency lights flooding the bridge in crimson. "Report," she shouted over the blare of warning klaxons. Multiple impacts across sectors 7 through 12. Rivera's fingers flew across his console. "They're targeting our shield generators. Clever bastards didn't even wait for their own deadline." Status of civilian evacuation. "Last transport cleared the system 10 minutes ago, Commander," Phillips managed from his station. "It's just us and the Luminians now." Another impact rocked the station. "Shields at 68%. Rivera called out. "They're concentrating fire on our weakest points. These aren't warning shots. They mean to take us apart piece by piece." Sarah's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. The station's weapons were defensive, meant to discourage pirates and smugglers, not face down a Drachnid battle fleet. They might take 1 or 2 ships with them, but against 12. Kiravel burst onto the bridge, her usual ethereal glow now a fierce, pulsing light. "Commander, we may have a way to help." She pressed a crystalline data device into Sarah's hand. "These are the specifications of Drachnid ship design. Their neural interfaces have a critical weakness, one we discovered while they were experimenting on our people." Sarah quickly fed the data into her tactical display. Her eyes widened as she processed the information. "Their neural control systems are biological. You're saying we could disrupt their entire command and control network?" "Yes." Kiravel's expression was grim. "But the targeting must be precise. Miss by even a fraction, and the feedback could kill their crews instead of just incapacitating them." The station rocked again. "Shields at 45%. Rivera shouted. "We can't take much more of this." Sarah studied the tactical display, an idea forming. "Their ships are linked to the flagship's neural network. If we could get a clean shot at their primary processor." She turned to Rivera. "Can you modify our sensor array to emit a focused pulse at these frequencies?" Rivera's eyes lit up as he caught her meaning. "Yes, but we'd need to drop our shields for at least 30 seconds to redirect the power. One hit during that window would destroy the station." Sarah finished. She looked at her crew, seeing the same determination reflected in every face. "Options." Phillips spoke up from his station. "The maintenance shuttles, small enough to slip through their formation, shielded enough to survive a few hits, could get close enough to transmit the pulse." "Suicide mission," Rivera muttered. "They'd track the source instantly." "I'll do it." Sarah's voice cut through the debate. "I'm not ordering anyone else on a one-way flight." "Commander." Phillips began to protest, but another impact cut him off. "Shields at 28%. multiple hull breaches on lower decks. Sarah was already moving toward the turbolift. Phillips, you have the con. Rivera, get that pulse ready to transmit. Kiravel. She paused, meeting the healer's luminous eyes. Thank you for trusting us. Kiravel caught her arm. Let me come with you. My abilities might make the difference between success and failure. Sarah wanted to refuse, to protect the being whose rescue had started all this, but there was no time for arguments. Engineering, prep maintenance Shuttle 3 for immediate launch. 2 passengers. The trip to the shuttle bay passed in a blur of emergency lights and rushing crews. As they strapped into the small craft, Sarah allowed herself one moment of doubt. Everything hinged on this desperate gambit. Your people have a saying, Kiravel said softly as the launch countdown began. Fortune favors the bold. Sarah managed a tight smile. Been studying human culture, have you? You fascinate us. So young as a species, yet so willing to fight for what you believe in. The shuttle's engines hummed to life. Launching in 3, 2, 1. They shot out of the bay like a bullet from a gun, immediately rolling to avoid the storm of weapons fire that greeted them. Sarah's world narrowed to the controls under her hands, the tactical display showing their target, and the constant stream of damage reports from Rivera. 17%. Multiple systems failing. Commander, if you're going to do this. The Drachnid flagship loomed before them, its massive hull bristling with weapons. Sarah jinked the shuttle through a maze of defensive fire, feeling the small craft shudder with each near miss. Kiravel's glow pulsed in time with the impacts, and Sarah felt a strange warmth flowing through her body, sharpening her reflexes, steadying her hands. Almost there, Sarah gritted through clenched teeth. Rivera, prepare to transmit on my mark. The flagship's neural processor was just ahead, a vulnerable point in the otherwise impenetrable armor. One shot, one chance to end this without wholesale slaughter. Now, the shuttle's modified sensors released their payload, not a weapon of destruction, but a precisely tuned pulse of energy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Drachnid ships began to drift. It's working. Rivera's voice crackled through the comm. Their systems are going dark, all ships showing multiple failures. Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief before reality reasserted itself. The shuttle's engines were dying, damaged by their run through the gauntlet. They were trapped in the middle of a disabled enemy fleet with no way home. She turned to Kiravel, intending to apologize for dragging her into this, but the words died in her throat. The healer was glowing brighter than ever, her form almost painful to look at directly. We have a saying too, Commander, Kiravel said, her voice echoing strangely. Those who save others save themselves. The light grew until it filled the shuttle, filled Sarah's vision, filled the universe itself. And in that radiance, she understood that this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. Sarah Chen floated in a sea of light. Pain had become a distant memory, replaced by a warmth that seemed to flow through every cell of her body. Somewhere beyond the radiance, she heard voices, human and Luminian blending together in urgent harmony. Her injuries are severe. Never attempted healing across species before. Neural patterns are stable, but she saved us all. We cannot let her die. Consciousness returned slowly, like dawn breaking over a distant horizon. Sarah opened her eyes to find herself in the station's medical bay, surrounded by a softly pulsing aurora of Luminian energy. Kiravel sat beside her, the healer's usual glow dimmed with exhaustion. Welcome back, Commander, Kiravel said softly. You gave us quite a scare. Sarah tried to sit up, but her body felt oddly weightless. The station, the Drachnids. Safe, thanks to you. Phillips appeared at her other side, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The pulse worked better than we could have hoped. Their entire fleet was incapacitated without a single casualty. Earth Command arrived 6 hours ago to take custody of the ships. Memory flooded back, the desperate shuttle run, the pulse, the blinding light. How? She looked at her hands, expecting to see them burned or scarred. but they were unmarked. Your shuttle was destroyed in the aftermath, Caraval explained. The feedback from the pulse was more violent than we anticipated. You should have died. The healer's glow brightened slightly. We couldn't allow that. What did you do? Something unprecedented. Caraval's voice held a mix of wonder and concern. All 37 of us linked our healing abilities together, creating a field strong enough to reach you before the explosion claimed you. We've never attempted to heal a human before, never channeled our power on such a scale. Phillips cleared his throat. There were side effects. Sarah felt it then. A subtle humming beneath her skin, a awareness of light and energy she'd never experienced before. What kind of side effects? In answer, Caraval held up a mirror. Sarah gasped. Her skin held a faint luminescence, nothing like the Luminian's natural glow, but unmistakably present. Her eyes, once dark brown, now held hints of swirling nebulae. The healing changed you at a cellular level, Caraval said gently. We couldn't prevent it, not while trying to save your life. You're still human, but something more as well. Sarah should have been terrified, should have felt violated by such a fundamental transformation. Instead, she felt a profound sense of peace. Thank you for saving me. You saved us first, Caraval reminded her. And in doing so, you may have changed everything. Phillips nodded agreement. The Drachnid ship's data cores contained evidence of their experiments on the Luminians, their plans to weaponize healing technology. Earth Command is livid. The diplomatic corps is already drafting proposals for a formal alliance with the Luminian people. And the Drachnids. Their fleet commanders are being charged with multiple violations of interstellar law. The Imperium is desperately trying to distance itself from the whole affair. Phillips smiled grimly. Apparently, they didn't expect anyone to stand up to them. Bad for their reputation. Sarah absorbed this, feeling the subtle pulse of her new abilities humming in harmony with Caraval's presence. What happens now? Now, Caraval said, we begin the real work. Your transformation proves that humans and Luminians can share more than just space. We can share our very essence. Think of the possibilities for healing, for understanding, for growth. Your people might not be comfortable with that idea, Sarah cautioned. Not everyone will want to. Change. Perhaps not. But you've shown us that change isn't always something to fear. Caraval's glow brightened with emotion. You risked everything to protect strangers, simply because it was right. That's a lesson both our species needed to learn. A soft chime interrupted them. Phillips checked his communicator and smiled. The first joint human-Luminian medical research team just arrived. They're requesting permission to begin studying the healing protocols used to save you. Granted, Sarah said, then hesitated. Assuming I still have command. Earth Command confirmed your position this morning, with a promotion. Phillips grinned. Apparently, preventing an interstellar war while fostering first contact with a beneficial alien species looks good on your record. Sarah laughed, then marveled at how the sound made the luminescence in her skin dance. One choice, made in a moment of crisis, had altered not just her own destiny, but potentially the future of two species. Commander, Rivera's voice came over the comm. We're receiving requests for interviews from every major news outlet in the Alliance. They all want to hear about the human commander who glows in the dark. Tell them to wait, Sarah said, exchanging glances with Caraval. We have more important work to do first. As if in response, her new abilities pulsed with potential, with promise. She wasn't just a bridge between species now. She was living proof that humanity's greatest strength lay not in weapons or technology, but in the capacity to reach across the stars and choose compassion over fear. The light within her burned bright with purpose. This wasn't an ending at all. It was a revolution. 1 year after the Drachnid incident, Earth Station Omega had become unrecognizable. What was once a military outpost now served as humanity's first joint medical research facility with the Luminians. The station's halls pulsed with combined human and Luminian life, a constant reminder of how much had changed. Sarah Chen stood in her office, watching a group of human medical students receiving instruction from a Luminian healer, her own subtle glow reflected in the viewport, a permanent testament to that fateful day. She smiled as the students gasped in wonder when their instructor demonstrated cellular regeneration on a damaged tissue sample. Still admiring her handiwork, Kiravel's familiar presence filled the room with warmth. The latest batch seems particularly promising. They're eager to learn, Sarah agreed, turning to face her friend. Though I suspect none of them expected their medical training to involve bioluminescence. Change comes in many forms. Kiravel's glow pulsed with amusement. Speaking of which, have you reviewed the latest data from the integration trials? Sarah called up the holographic display, streams of information filling the air between them. 15 successful human Luminian healing bonds established this month alone. No adverse reactions, no cellular rejection. She gestured to her own softly glowing skin. Turns out I was just the beginning. You opened a door nobody knew existed, Kiravel said softly. Though not everyone is happy about it. That was an understatement. The past year had seen intense debate throughout human space. Some welcomed the advancement in medical science that the Luminian partnership offered. Others feared the changes it might bring to human society. The fact that volunteers for the integration program had to be willing to undergo permanent physical transformation made it particularly controversial. Fear of change is universal, Sarah mused, but so is the desire to help others. In the end, that's what matters. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Earth Command. Sarah's breath caught as she read it. The Senate just approved it. Full citizenship rights for integrated humans and permanent refugee status for all Luminians who seek it. Kiravel's glow brightened dramatically. Then it's official. Our peoples are truly united. More than that. Sarah smiled, her own luminescence dancing with joy. The Drachnid Imperium's influence is crumbling. 3 more systems have requested protection under the new Human-Luminian Accord. Turns out there are a lot of people in this galaxy tired of living under threats and fear. And it all began because one human commander refused to turn away those in need. Kiravel moved to stand beside her at the viewport. Below them, the station's new medical wing gleamed with the combined light of both species working together. I just did what was right, Sarah said quietly. Anyone would have. But they didn't. You did. Kiravel's hand found hers, their combined glow creating patterns of light that danced across the office walls. You humans have a saying. The darkest night brings out the brightest stars. Sarah laughed. Still studying our culture, I see. Always. You continue to surprise us. Kiravel's expression grew thoughtful. Did you ever imagine, that day in the shuttle, that we would end up here? Sarah considered the question, remembering the desperate gamble that had changed everything. No, she admitted. I just wanted to protect innocent lives. I never dreamed it would lead to this. She gestured at herself, at the station, at the future they were building together. A soft alert chimed, reminding them of the day's schedule. The first graduation ceremony for integrated human healers was about to begin. Sarah straightened her uniform, still strange to see it shimmer slightly with her movement. Ready to make history again? She asked Kiravel. With you. Always. As they walked together toward the ceremony, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had brought them here. One choice, made in crisis, had rippled outward to touch countless lives. The Drachnids had sought to weaponize the power of healing, never understanding that its true strength lay in bringing people together, in bridging the gaps between species and cultures. In the grand auditorium, humans and Luminians sat side by side, some glowing, some not, all united in purpose. The graduating class filed in, their combined light creating an aurora that filled the space with hope. Sarah took her place at the podium, her own gentle radiance a symbol of what was possible when compassion overcame fear. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, we faced a choice between what was easy and what was right. Today, we celebrate not just the graduation of our first class of integrated healers, but the birth of a new era. An era where the boundaries between species fade in the light of shared purpose and understanding. She looked out at the faces before her, seeing in them the future they were building together. The stars are filled with darkness, with those who would use power to dominate and destroy. But as long as there are those willing to stand up for what's right, willing to reach across the void to help others, that darkness will never prevail. Her glow brightened with conviction, echoed by every integrated human and Luminian in the room. Because that's what humans do. We extend our hands to those in need. We fight for what's right. And sometimes, in doing so, we become something more than we ever imagined possible. The light of two species united filled the station, a beacon visible from space, announcing to the galaxy that a new path was possible, not through force or fear, but through the simple, revolutionary act of choosing compassion over conflict, healing over harm, hope over hatred. It was a light that would never fade.